Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has appeared on Sky News. He was asked about his failure to reach a negotiated settlement with Britain's rail workers.
Why have these negotiations failed?
Essentially, the unions do not want to modernise the work practices so we can run a modern railway for passengers. Essentially, they've been taking the passengers for a ride with some of these antiquated methods that are in place. For example, not being able to send out a single van, having to send two vans to maintenance, and not running a 7-day service, for example. We have to literally, on some railway lines, appeal to the better nature of staff to even run a railway service on a Sunday. And that can't be right in the 21st century when leisure travel actually is the bigger part, or becoming the bigger part of the transport network. So we have to have this modernisation. It's there to be sorted out, and therefore a pay rise can be had as well. But I'm afraid the unions have been incredibly militant about this, and that's where we are today.
And the unions are saying that they haven't spoken to a minister for months. When was the last time you spoke to them?
Yeah, they don't need to speak to ministers to resolve this, because their employers are the people who have the mandate to negotiate this. They're the people who they can resolve this with. So this is just, I'm afraid, them trying to distract attention. And if I put this into perspective, since I've been Transport Secretary, they've issued about 160 different disputes. There hasn't been a single day where there hasn't been either strike action or a mandate for strike action ongoing. That's just not normal in any industry. And that's why we need to, I'm afraid, do more to remove the power of these very militant extreme left unions from disrupting everyday lives to ordinary people.
That was Grant Shapps blaming the strikes on the unions, who he thinks are overly militant and opposed to any modernisation. The RMT's Mick Lynch was up next on Sky. Let's see his response.
He's responsible for this dispute in the sense that he has a veto on what the train operating companies can offer us. It's written into their contracts that he's directly responsible for industrial relations, and he can dictate what the terms are. And the fact is, they've made no offer on pay towards our members. What they've offered us is mass redundancies, recontracting our members on inferior terms and conditions, massive changes to their work-life balance, and cuts in Network Rail to the safety regime of up to 50% of the inspection. So he's caused this problem, and he's got to facilitate a way out of it, and he could do that today. And if he wants to facilitate a negotiated settlement, I'm very happy to deal with him. But what he won't do is contact me or any of my officers or any of the people responsible for this negotiation and create a way forward.
And the reason he won't is because he says that you're militant, that you're extreme left. And he went on to say that you're not normal because there have been 160 different disputes, and there is some sort of dispute or balloting for a dispute every single day.
Well, it's ironic to be called not normal by the Conservative Party, who are taking themselves into the realms of the extreme right at the moment, as we've seen in this contest. They're saying that paying tax isn't normal, and having free trade unions with the ability to take industrial action isn't normal. The people behind me are ordinary men and women in this country. They work hard to deliver the railway service. And what they don't want to do is see their wages diluted, their terms and conditions diluted, and their contracts of employment ripped up. So I'm not a militant. I'm not even a member of a political party, and I haven't been for 30 years. So the idea that we're running some ideological campaign is nonsense, frankly. What we want to do is get a settlement, so a straightforward industrial dispute on jobs, pay and conditions.
Is it right that he says that 2 vans have to go to every job as opposed to even 1 van being needed, but you double up on everything?
No, that's a load of nonsense. He doesn't know what he's talking about. We are talking to Network Rail about the deployment of staff every day of the week. There's never been an occasion where our members refuse to get in a van with other people. It's rubbish.
Mick Lynch also contextualised Shapps' claims about the frequency of disputes by saying the RMT deal with over 500 employers, and that disputes moving to strike action is actually incredibly rare, obviously incredibly disingenuous from Grant Shapps. In a separate and later interview, Lynch was asked about the disruption that strikes inevitably cause, and this time he was even more robust.
We don't want to disrupt people, but they have an effect on the companies. They're not getting their income and they're being indemnified by the government to conduct this dispute. The government is giving these companies £20 million a day to run this dispute on their behalf. So it has an effect. We don't want to have the effect and the disruption on the public. We want a settlement and an agreement that our members can support.
And is going on strike the only way to achieve this, or is there another form of action you could take?
I could do trial by combat or something if you like, but I can't think of a way at the moment because we've been negotiating for 2 years. But it would be interesting if me and Grant Shapps went head to head. We could see how we got on with that, if that's not too flippant. If you've got any other ideas about how I can pursue it, I'll happily take them up.
Dahlia, would you like to see Mick Lynch in a trial by combat head-to-head with Grant Shapps, and who would win?
I mean, if they're going to ban the right to strike, then I don't know what. Anyway, let me not speak too much. But this is just like the most classic, old-fashioned, boring form of union bashing, basically. It's, you blame workers, you push society to its limits. You create a completely unsustainable system. And then when society reaches that breaking point, which often manifests in the form of mass strikes, you then turn around and blame the workers for the disruption that everyone is feeling, which is not a consequence. It's not like workers going on strike is a symptom, not a cause of that crisis. It's essentially like pushing someone off a cliff and then getting mad at them for wasting ambulance resources when they actually try to resolve the situation. And again, this is the classic Thatcherite model. I thought, when Grant Shapps was saying, oh, the unions just don't want to modernize, this was exactly what we heard from Thatcher. And for her, modernization was a way of making the financialization of the economy seem like an inevitability. What she was basically saying was that this transition from one stage of capitalism to financial capitalism was inevitable, and the unions were just refusing to modernize. And what I think Grant Shapps is gesturing towards there when he says, the unions are refusing to modernize, is to essentially move to this kind of Uberization of the economy, which, as we know from the Uber files, Grant Shapps was very happy to be actively lobbied and to actively lobby on behalf of Uber, despite the fact that we knew that they were breaking the law on employment classification, on worker classification, and the fact that we knew that they were flouting local regulations. And what I mean by that Uberization of the economy is trying to create a kind of employment model where companies and employers essentially take no responsibility for health and safety, take no responsibility for the standard post-war social contract employment norms like pensions, like sick pay, paid holiday leave, treating the workers like they are disposable, like they're on demand, like it doesn't matter how you treat this worker. When they burn out, we're just going to move on to the next one. We're just going to hire and rehire. And essentially making the workforce incredibly insecure and incredibly precarious. And that is the model that someone like Grant Shapps means when he talks about modernizing the economy. And that is precisely the thing that the RMT is trying to resist. And so that exact playing out of, trying to transition to an even more exploitative and unstable form of capitalism under the guise of modernization and blaming workers who are rightfully resisting the degradation of their rights. It's the same Thatcherite model just being rolled out in the 21st century. And of course, as was true during Thatcher's time, none of this is inevitable. There is no inevitable stage of development that we all have to move towards. The way that we go over the next 5, 10, 15 years is a political choice. And the choice that the Tories are trying to force us to make is an unsustainable and catastrophic one. And the choice that Mick Lynch and the rest of the true Labour movement are trying to push us to make is one that is environmentally sustainable and that actually enables workers to be paid adequately for their time and to also have other forms of social welfare to catch them when they get old, when they get sick, if they have dependents, etc. And so really, the question is between those two different kinds of working model. I know which one I'm on the side of, but I think that we should really see this as Grant Shapps deploying the exact same tactics that Thatcher deployed. And we should learn from those struggles to figure out how we are going to ensure that, unlike in the 1970s, Shapps and his like don't win this time round.